So my name is Michael Bossetta. I'm a postdoc here at Lund doing research on social media and politics. I'm going to present to you a Finnish study, kind of an experimental one that used a bit of automation techniques, looking at whether we are safe from weaponized bots. And I got interested in this project looking at some media reports that were basically looking at foreign interference in the US election, where foreign operatives were using automated bots in order to send links through Twitter that, when clicked on, would ask US government employees about putting in their personal credentials, like we saw with the DNC hacks, or would actually install a virus onto that device that could then take over the device and then crawl into the government network and steal secrets from the Pentagon, for example. So it gets to this idea of Russian bots, but not in a disinformation context, which is where we usually think about them, right? Spreading disinformation. This is arguably a much harder form of weaponry, where if we think about a traditional missile, the warhead is just this little cone at the top. The rest of the device is computers and fuel in order to get a warhead to its target. And the question is, can social media act as a conduit to deliver weapons, essentially, through digital environments? So if we think about what this is, it's a new form of phishing. And you may be familiar with phishing in the context of email through the Nigerian print scam, where you're supposed to send your bank information and someone will wire you money. But now, with social media and automation, there's the chance or the opportunity to do this both at a more personalized level, which would be called spear phishing, but also at scale as well. So this is no secret to platforms themselves. We've seen how Facebook in 2017 released a report looking at how the platform was used by bad actors. And it may be hard to read here, but what they're highlighting is a few problems we've been seeing with social media platforms and foreign interference. So you have spear phishing, disinformation, and bots. And so what I wanted to see is, could I somehow conduct an experiment that tested how susceptible or how vulnerable are people to these type of attacks? I chose Twitter for this experiment because the way that it's designed, its architecture, it has been called a Fisher's paradise, because you can create accounts very easily, you can automate them. It has a very open network structure. It's very public. You can see what people are writing on Twitter, which is a great source for OSINT, or open source intelligence gathering. So when you're checking in, you're posting photos, someone can essentially spy on you and track your movements and where you're going. It supports these short URLs like Bitly or Google, and these links hide actually where the destination of that link is. It obfuscates it. It allows you to @mention people, even if you're not friends with them. So they'll notify that they've been targeted in a tweet. And it tends to have this news-oriented content profile, right? There's a lot of news on Twitter, and therefore it's easy to mix in fake news with that. So I ran a little Cyberattack using the Python program Snapper, which is developed by two cybersecurity researchers at ZeroFox, and basically just adapted it to my own purposes. What it does is you feed in a list of Twitter usernames, it scrapes what they've been tweeting about, and then uses a very basic form of machine learning to generate a tweet back to them based on what they've already said and based on their interests. So if someone is tweeting a lot about sports, you would feed their username in, it would crawl that they've been talking about sports, and then generate a sports-related message to them in the language they already used. And so what the program does is it @mentions the user, puts the generated tweet, I added a little pointing emoji to sort of encourage people to look at a short URL, which looked like this, essentially just a breaking news story that didn't involve any information about any candidates. I'm not trying to influence people's opinions, maybe like the Russians would, but essentially it says, I created a fake news account called the DC News Report, which uncovered an incredible scandal involving this 2018 rising star. So this is the Washington Post's Twitter account, which was the baseline for what I created, which is called the DC News Report. And you'll see here what that link looked like on Twitter. So in order to think about who I wanted to target, I wanted to look at people who were talking about politics on Twitter before the 2018 US midterm election. So I searched for the term midterm during this week in September, which was during the Brett Kavanaugh confirmation hearings. Very polarized debate in the US, but a very good chance to catch what people are talking about expressing their political ideologies on Twitter. So I kept only those users that had between 50 and 400 followers to get an idea of the sort of average Twitter user. not a big influential account, but kind of your normal everyday Twitter user, and then scraped their Twitter timelines and divided them into right or left-wing users based on whether they were tweeting about Make America Great Again on the right or Blue Wave, which is a hashtag supporting Democrats. Then I took a random sample for each user. I took 10 of their tweets and kept them in the data set if at least 8 of those 10 tweets were about politics, so very highly politically expressive users, and at least 8 of the tweets had to come from the same device, because research would suggest that people are more likely to click on fake news or disinformation on a mobile device because the screen is smaller and there's less context for you to discern whether it's real or fake. So overall, 138 users were included in this study. There were supposed to be more, but Twitter ended up shutting down my bot. So here's an example. It's a little bit hard to read of what a tweet sent to a left-wing user looked like. As you can see, the machine didn't perform that well. And I thought about trying to make those generated tweets a bit better, but at the same time, I wanted to keep this very basic. I wasn't really trying to fool people too much, let's put it that way. And if you look at the right wing, it's a similar picture. It's basically just putting different tweets together and again, notifying that user that they received a message from this outlet. So I just want to stress, it wasn't a real cyber attack. If anyone clicked on the link, they were brought to a Google form, which asked them about their social media use, and 8 people were kind enough to fill that out. So getting to the results, the top line is that 1 in 5 users actually clicked this link. And I ran some very basic statistical tests to see whether someone's likelihood to click the link was based on whether they were right or left wing. Research would suggest that right wingers are more likely to spread disinformation and take in information less analytically from a psychological perspective. And I thought again that mobile devices or mobile users of Twitter would be more likely to click. Turns out neither was the case, which essentially means that your susceptibility or your chance to click on a fake link on Twitter doesn't really correlate with ideology or device. So in that sense, sort of everyone is at risk. So the question is, are we safe from weaponized bots? Maybe. You might be thinking that, if you're not on Twitter, I'm safe. At the same time, the media reports that I showed you at the beginning were stressing that when some of these Russian operatives were targeting government employees, they weren't targeting the employees themselves, but their kids and their wives would infect those devices and then crawl into the government computer through their home Wi-Fi network. So there's some implications about the Internet of Things and being connected. So maybe you're safe, but someone in your network is not. So lastly, if you want to read the study, you can check it out by going to this short link if you dare. Thank you.